Welcome back, everybody, to God Girl Diaries. I'm so excited for you to be here today. Today is actually an anniversary. This is the 1 year anniversary of officially launching God Girl Diaries on YouTube. And for that, we have a very special guest that I'm super excited to talk about. And today we're going to be talking about God Girls overcoming false labels.
Yes.
It's going to be good. But before we get into that, let's introduce our guest today. Rhoda, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, yes. So thank you, Julie, so much for having me
Of course.
here. I'm excited to be here all the way from STL, St. Louis, Missouri. And I am Rhoda Banks, and I grew up in the inner city of St. Louis, low-income housing project. I like to say I worked my way from the projects to the boardroom or from the parking lot to the boardroom because I started my career at a large healthcare system in St. Louis as a parking garage cashier or attendant. And I am currently the executive head of culture and inclusion at a financial institution. And I've had a full career. I have a bachelor's degree in business administration, two master's degrees, one in human resource training and development, and one in healthcare administration. I am a wife of James Banks for 34 years. I'm a mother of two sons, James Jr. and Jalen. And I am a sort of an entrepreneur as well because I'm an author of two books, and I just released my second book called Daughter of an Assassin.
That's right.
It is my memoir, and it is a true story. Everything in it is true. I'm also an adjunct instructor for Webster University. But more importantly, I am a giver of others. I am a developer of others. I'm a mentor. I'm a friend to many. I'm a coach. And I always say, at the end of my time here, the legacy I want to have left is that not only did I want to see others win, I helped them to win. And that is how I truly live my life, pouring into others, developing them, because that's truly where I find the most fulfillment is to see others grow and glow.
That is absolutely beautiful. And I think the thing that stood out to me is you said you went from the parking lot to the boardroom.
Yes.
And I just want to stick on that a little bit because today we're talking about false labels.
Yes.
And before we get into that, just talking about false labels, what does that mean to you? Because when I think of false labels, I think of Abraham comes to mind.
Right.
He's named Abram before his name is changed.
Yes.
And Abram means exalted father, but Abraham means father of many.
Yes.
And so I sat down and I said, why is it so important for God to change his name? Can't he just live his life as Abram?
Right.
But God didn't want to work like that. He said, no, if I'm moving you into your next season, you can't go with the same names as your father has labeled you, as your earthly father.
Yes.
You have to go with the identity that Christ gave you. So I'm just curious as to what does false labels mean to you?
False labels mean to me, and I'll relate it back to the book, because when the Lord gave me the motivation and the inspiration to write this book, it was about 15 years ago. And I was on a road trip for work. And we were in the car, and I remember what spoke in my spirit was DOA, dead on arrival, is normally what you think of when you hear that. And I was like, that's going to be the name of the book, Dead on Arrival. And as time went by and I began to listen to the voice of the Lord, he said, that's not an accurate depiction of who you are. That's probably what people thought, given the circumstances I was born into. I was meant to be dead on arrival. If you read my story and hear me testify and talk about different scenarios and experiences, you will be, wow, like she shouldn't be here. And so I said, you know what, I'm not going with that title because that's not true.
Right.
That's not true. And so what false labels mean to me is, number one, is driven and motivated by society and what the world labels us as. So being a child of a single mother who grew up in low-income housing project, I've been told and teased and talked about in school, and said, Rhoda live in the ghetto. That's a label. And so I have a chapter I've written in another book, which is a anthology of women's stories. And the title of my actual chapter is I Grew Up in the Ghetto, So What?
That's
Oh,
right.
so what? It has nothing to do with where God has planned for me to go in my life. So to me, I am not a supporter of false labels. In fact, I don't conform. I
Okay.
fight against them, and you get to determine what your label is based on where you want your life to go, based on the experience you want to give to others, based on the legacy and the brand that you want to assign to yourself. And so your values, your internal drivers is really what drives what your label is.
That's right. And I'm just curious to know how you were able to hold on to those labels. Because
Mm,
again, when I think of Abraham, he has no children. He
right.
has no legacy. So it's like, God, you told me I'd be the father of many, but I don't see it. But I'm
Right.
old. But so as you're getting these labels growing up,
Hmm.
how did young Rhoda hold on to the true label that God had for you?
And I think that was something that God put in me.
Mm.
Because to me, I seemed weak, shy, easily broken, but apparently I was not those things. And so, not knowing the Lord at a young age,
Mm-hmm.
but believing that there was a God, I
Mm.
always believed that. I even used to write letters to Him
That's
as a
beautiful.
kid. But not knowing Him as a young person, I believe I had to rely on Him to put in me the resiliency and the fight that it would take to get to where I'm at today.
Right.
And then after I've matured and after I come to know Christ as my personal Savior, which I eventually did, then you lean into His voice and His promises. So no matter what I saw with my natural eye, no matter how I felt, I believed His word. I literally believed His word. Like in the word, He would say, before heaven and earth have to pass away, before it pass away, that's how you know your faith works. He say, your faith will move me on the throne. And if it don't, heaven and earth will have had to pass away. And so I was like taking Him literally at that. And if I don't get this thing I'm going after, heaven and earth would have had to pass away because He said He will honor my faith. So really, as I mature and come to know the Lord and my relationship with Him strengthened, then my faith grew. And I leaned into my faith that helped me to overcome, and I'm still yet overcoming, but it helped me to overcome and fight against the labels and deny the labels that were contradicting the labels and the promises that He had in place for me.
That's right. And I think it's beautiful that faith led you to where you are
Mm-hmm.
now. My question to you is, you said you didn't know God, but you knew of Him, you knew
Yes.
there was a God.
Yes.
How did you begin to grow in His word and relationship with Him? Because I think a
Yes.
lot of people oh yeah, I believe in God, but there are people who don't. There are
Mm-hmm.
people who are fighting these false labels and don't know that there is a
Right.
God. So how did you find Him?
I would say faith comes by hearing and hearing by the word of God. And how can you hear without a teaching? How can He teach except He be sent? So God put my husband in my life, who is not saved yet to this
Really?
day. I'm
Wow.
claiming it. A sanctified wife should
Okay.
sanctify the husband. However, his dad and mother were. And that's how I came to know the Lord.
Wow.
And so when we got married, and Mr. Banks, who my late father-in-law, he would witness to me about the Lord, and he would say, "Sister, if you want these things, God got them for you." We were so dirt poor, my husband and I. I didn't even have the right clothes that I need. I didn't even have clothes really, and I was constantly asking my mother-in-law, because we wore the same size, "Can I have that? Can I have that?" And I remember my father-in-law say, "Sister, one day the Lord is going to bless you. You're going to have the ability to buy whatever you need." And everyone that knows me knows I love fashion, love clothes. I have 3 closets
Oh my
with clothes, but I'm constantly giving away. So I notice if I don't wear things for 6 months or longer, I'm giving them out. No matter if it still have a price tag on it or not, I'm giving and sewing into someone else's life. But that's how I came to know the Lord, is through by someone witnessing to me and then bringing me to conviction through the teaching that I heard. And then after hearing that and accepting Christ, experiencing Him in such a beautiful way, there's no failure in Him. He has never failed me. And if you lean into his word and his promises, he always comes through. And so why wouldn't you want to continue that walk with someone like that? So I just fell in love.
Oh, that's beautiful. And that's what I feel too with my relationship with God. It's kind of like, you hear of God, but I think to get to know him, to know God is to love him. To
Yes.
love him is to obey him.
Yes.
And I think the key thing in your story is you had community.
Mm-hmm.
So how important is community to your
Mm-hmm.
walk with Christ and even
Yes.
identifying false labels?
Yes, it is so important. Community is huge. First of all, as humans, we need one another and we're very connected, even though the world try to teach us otherwise. You need, you notice people who don't have community, who are living their lives alone, they usually end up dying from some form of depression or etc. It's because that's not how he designed us in community. When he created Adam, he gave him a partner, community, and they became one community. And speaking of labels, so it's important. It's also important though to make sure you have the right community,
Right.
and that you're not unequally yoked, and that you have people in your circle who, number one, light up when you walk in a room. They're excited to see you, and therefore they're rooting for you, and they're encouraging you, and they're inspiring you. And all of that matters, especially when it comes to the labels, because the stories we tell ourselves, you heard me say earlier, I saw myself as, and still struggle with some of this. I saw myself as weak, shy, withdrawn, and broken. But what the world saw was this strong, resilient individual. And even today, I have the imposter syndrome where I think I'm not worthy of the acknowledgments that I receive. But I keep trying to tell myself, it's got to be some truth to it, Rhoda. Just go ahead and lean into it. But then I feel like, am I being arrogant and not humble? But the Lord say, you are who I made you are. And he told me before I was having a day where I was really down, and he spoke to me and he said, you are made from my DNA. And he said, because of that, you're going to exude certain behaviors and patterns and personality that is going to draw people, and it's going to free them, and it's going to inspire them, and it's going to uplift them because they are experiencing Christ through me because of his DNA. And he said, and I'll never forget this, he said, and the world would know that you were here.
That is beautiful.
Yes.
That is so beautiful. I love how you talked about DNA because when you're sick or you go to the doctor, the first thing they do, they take your blood.
Right.
And they look through and see, okay, you have this, you have this. Is there a family history of this?
Yes.
And I think with our relationship with God, once we become one with him, we have his DNA, we have his blood. But I think we don't know what's in the family line, such as his promises, such as we're fearfully and wonderfully made. We're made in his image. We don't know that this is in our blood until we get to know our family history, which is history with the Father. And I think that that's very beautiful. One of the things I do want to talk about is the fact that we're living in an age of social media. And I appreciate your honesty talking about how some days you feel inadequate, because I think in the days of social media, we're so caught up in the highlight reels of everybody's life. And it's at an all-time high. And a lot of people feel as though they cannot make it to whatever standard, impossible standard that social media has. How do you navigate? You said that there are times where you feel low, and I feel that all the time. I talk to God and I say, how is it that you've called me to do these things? And sometimes it's like I have to convince myself. So my question to you is, how do you navigate those times where the Rhoda Banks that everybody sees may not feel like that?
Right. So I walk by faith and not by sight, first and foremost. And that means that regardless of how I feel, that is not my reality. My reality is what God promised me. So sometimes that goes against how I'm feeling. when it comes to social media, what I would tell the world is I saw a clip of a man that was promoting a book on the Breakfast Club about anxiety. And he said the world has it. We all have some level of anxiety. And one of the big reasons why is because of social media. He said because God, when he designed us, he didn't design us. We're not even supposed to know this many people. Right. We should have access to this much information coming at us all at once. So taking a break from that is very wise. Number two, comparison is the thief of joy. And so I would encourage and inspire people because this is something I can honestly say I don't do. I never compare myself to others. Like, I'm genuinely happy for other people and what they have. Like, I want them to glow. I can glow too. Yep. So it's just no reason for me to compare. And maybe they're glowing now because it's their season to glow. My season may not have arrived yet, and I'm okay with that, but I believe that it's coming. And so the way I navigate this life and deal with these stories we tell ourselves, I have a friend that would call it stinking thinking, is to talk to myself as though I was trying to inspire and encourage you. I'm always trying to encourage and inspire someone else. So, Rhoda, tell yourself the same story. Read some of your own words. Apply some of that to your life. It is true. And so I talk to myself just like I'm talking, if I will be talking to you and trying to encourage and inspire you. I flip those stories and I start telling myself positive things.
And one thing I do want to say is that you do inspire me. I know I told you this, but you genuinely, you light up a room and you stand on who you are. And I think that's beautiful. And I already know in your journey that you've impacted a lot of people. But have you ever heard a story that really touched you based on them hearing your story?
So it's funny you should ask this. A couple of months ago, so I have a friend slash mentee who we have been friends since 2007, and her name is Corman. And Corman worked for me. I hired her as an admin. She originally was hesitant to take the job. It was an internal transfer for her, and it was a lateral, so she wasn't going to get a raise. She took the job anyway because she said she called around to different people based on where I used to work, and they was like, "Oh my God, you get to work with Rhoda. You need to take that job." So she takes the job. From that moment, and I didn't know this was a gift I had. I realized it over time. I started to pour into Corman. I encouraged her to go back to school. She got her bachelor's in IT. She graduated with honors. Wow. She was very, very smart. And as an admin, I would have her, I was over the training team, built it from the ground up. I would have her training other admins. I would have her doing things to build her skills so when the time came, I can promote her to a trainer. And then I promoted her to a senior principal trainer. And then she eventually went on to grow her career, and she just kept growing. She starts her own consulting business. She's still a consultant to this day. She makes a lot of money. And we are still connected. So we don't talk every day, but we are connected. So we'll text maybe. I just had dinner with her the other evening, but we hadn't seen each other before that since this event that I want to share with you. So she reached out to me and she said, "Rhoda, are you available whatever date it was on a Saturday?" I said, "Yes." "Will you come to some type of conference?" I don't even know what it was. I just said yes because it was Corman. Yeah. So I'm going to say yes. So I get dressed. I go to the event. I'm sitting there. I just knew she's going to speak. So I say, "Oh, she wants me to be there so she can have support." So they call her up, they introduce her. She's one of the keynote speakers. It was a women's conference. And she is speaking. She starts off, and I was like, "Look at Corman. Look, she's speaking now." And then she starts telling this story about this leader she had and how this leader encouraged her and inspired her and challenged her. And so she said it was one Monday, it was her birthday. and she wanted to come to work dressed really nice. So she went shopping and bought this lime green outfit and these beige shoes, and it was a suit jacket. It was lime green, and then she saw a lime green purse, so she got the purse, and then she said she even had on lime green eyeshadow. So she come in the office and she said, "I just know my leader gonna be like, you look so cute." She said, and the leader walked in and said, "Good morning," and just walked to her office. She's like, "Oh, she mustn't see me." So she said later on she went back to the leader's office and engaged in a conversation. And she said she still didn't say nothing. She's like, maybe she will say something later. So she said later she was interacting with the leader, and the leader said, "You look cute for a weekend." And she said, "What you mean?" She said, so the leader sat her down and told her, you 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 need to dress for where you want to be and not for where you're at. And the leader started to explain what professional attire looked like. I was the leader. So then I started thinking back, and I remembered the story. And so she told it as she never used the name. She said this leader took her, they scheduled a half day, which was her and I did do this. And I took her to lunch. She said we went to a fancy restaurant, y'all. It was Red Lobster. And then I was talking to her about her body shape and how she should dress. And I took her shopping and I bought her several outfits. She don't know this. I did not have any money. I used credit cards, and I had like 4 different credit cards, and I had called to check on the balances, and I knew how much I had on each one. And I bought her several outfits. And she shared that it wasn't about the outfits. It was the fact that I poured into her. I cared enough. And she said, and I remember her telling me this. She said, "I'm always going to give you your flowers." So in that moment in the room at that event, the story she shared, then she said, and that leader is here today, and she's right here. So people didn't know it was me until she said that. And so she got up, she gave me flowers and this gift, and it was just very special and beautiful. And she said, and I wanted to give her her flowers. And her whole speech talk was about the power of mentorship and how important it is as women for us to uplift. She said because the way she started her talk, she was on like a phone, and she was like, "Girl, did you see what Keisha had on? Why she wear those shoes?" And then she said, "Why we do that?" She said, "So Rhoda could have talked about me behind my back. I could have said all these negative things, but instead I tried to teach her and educate her. And there's nothing wrong with color, because I love it. But what I was trying to teach Corman was how to do it in a way that she could be taken seriously versus not. And I've continued to be her mentor and friend, and I love her to death, and I appreciate her doing it. And that was the start of my Saturday. I had no idea what I was even going for. I just thought I was there to support her. And so that's the best example I can give that was recent as well. Now, I've poured into many people's lives, and some of them do reach back and say, "Rhoda, I appreciate you." I've gotten phone calls from people I've had to terminate and thanking me for even that. I've helped more people, though, than I've heard from. And that's okay, because I don't do it for that.
You do it for God.
Yes.
I think that that's beautiful. And one of the foundations of God Girl Diaries is the ability to share your story. And I think a lot of people feel as though they don't have a story. Oh, I just live a quiet life. But God moves through you, through the conversations, through connections with other people. Like you said, we're not made to be alone. We're meant to be in community. So the fact that you stepped out on faith and poured into her, who she is now is a product of the seed that you placed in her at a young age. So I just want to emphasize the importance of sowing into people, whether it's a conversation, whether it's a cup of coffee. Don't take it as anything light, because at the end of the day, we have Christ in us. So when we're loving on others, that is the love of Christ working through us to get to the other person. I think one of the most beautiful things about your story, it reminds me of Romans 8:28, which says all things work together for the good. And when I think of the false label that was
Mhm.
placed on you, I believe
Mhm.
that God turned it into
Mhm.
something beautiful. And I just
Yes.
want to know your perspective on that in
Yes.
parallel to your life.
Yes, I agree with you. In fact, the subtitle of my book, Daughter of Assassins, Turning Pain into Power, A Journey of Faith and Perseverance. So what was meant for bad was turned to good. Like, you have to know the story to really understand what I'm talking about. Like, yeah, we hear about people being born against the odds. But how many people are born whose dad is a known murderer? To this day, they're still doing documentaries on.
Wow.
And he's killed and impacted in a negative way lots of people's lives. So that, how many people do you know born into that? And in addition to that, born into an environment or a condition that is fraught with day on the daily, there's murders. How many people you know that after being born under that type of a legacy and in that type of low income environment where murders are happening on a daily almost, at the age of 5, literally sitting there, the lady who my mom was rolling her hair was shot and murdered in between my mother's legs. And knowing the killer, and the killer telling your mom, if you say anything, I'll kill you and Rhoda. And then after experiencing all of that, witnessing your mom select the wrong men after men after men, and then ending up with one that was very abusive towards her, didn't like me because of who my dad was, and I knew he didn't like me. I felt it, like
Mm-hmm.
it was very evident. And then having to go through all of that, having her own near-death experiences, nearly drowning and gave up, and then the lifeguard reached in and pulled me out, and being hit by a car in 2008, almost died from kidney failure due to an allergic reaction to penicillin. That after many visits to the ER and doctor, not running tests, don't care, this is how they do African Americans, specifically women. So you have to take your own care in your own hand, and you have to be an advocate for yourself. These are just some of the stories and some of the trauma that I've gone through. And time after time after time, it seems like this is going to be the end for me. This is how it's going to end. And the Lord said, not yet. Not yet. And he continues to give me testimony after testimony. Now, I'm not saying that you have to go through hardship to have a testimony, and you shouldn't have to go through trauma to be triumphant, but you have to go through something. So no test, no testimony.
That's right.
And so in 2008, when I almost died from sepsis because my kidneys was swelling and inflamed and no one knew, um, I remember being in the hospital, and this young man who I believe was an angel was disguised as the radiology tech, like the assistant to the radiologist. He shows up in the room where they're putting the PIC line in me. He's very kind. He takes me to my room. The next day he comes to get me. They say they're going to do a biopsy. I heard the word biopsy. I think cancer. I start crying. He puts me in a wheelchair. I'm boohooing crying. He didn't realize it. He realized I'm crying. He's like, oh no, you're crying. He stops the wheelchair on the way down, and he leans in my ear and he says, this is not unto death. The kidneys are resilient.
Wow.
No human talks like that. I stopped instantly crying because I recognized the voice and the words he spoke was so powerful. Go get the ultrasound. I get a call. Rhoda, the doctor said you're going to be fine. You had an allergic reaction to penicillin. They're going to have to give me, it took a year of recovery. It really did. I had to go on prednisone. It was a whole event. However, the Lord told me while I was going through this, I am the center of your life. I am the core of your existence. In me, you live and you move and you have your being. He just kept saying it over and over when I was sick and didn't know why. I am the core of your existence. In me, you live and you move and you have your being. So after I went through that, I had a creatinine level, which is how they measure how your kidneys are functioning, of 17. Your creatinine level is supposed to be 0.00000. They say they had never, ever seen any human with a creatinine level of 17 because when it reaches 6, you usually have to go on dialysis. And I didn't.
Oh my goodness.
Why? Because he's the core of my existence. I'm existing, we all are, because of him. We think it's because our heart is beating. He keeping it beating. He kept the kidneys sustaining. They were struggling to work on their own, but he gave it the extra needed until I can get the help I needed to survive. And he's told me, I have a work for you to do.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not one scenario that I can think of that will stop me from doing the work that I know that he's given me to do, which is why I wrote the book, which is why I do the podcasting, which is why I pour to others and I mentor them, which is why I am Rhoda. And so there are scenarios happening even now and spirits fighting against me and trying to turn me down and all of that. And he said, ignore that.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, I believe so deeply. You hear me say how I took his word literally.
Yeah.
That this is the purpose that he has given me on earth. And I am about doing that business that he's asked me to do. I'm going to do it. And there's no scenario that I can think of that will stop me. No job. I don't care what their title is. It doesn't matter.
I love that.
No weapon formed against me shall prosper.
That's right. And when I look at this book and I look at this cover, this is a result of not listening to false labels.
Yes.
This is a product of not listening to false labels and listening in to the voice of God. And I just think it's so beautiful that this is not just a book, but this is a testimony, a fingerprint of what God has done in the lives of Rhoda, in the life of Rhoda Banks. And Rhoda, my last question would be, what advice do you have for someone listening across the screen?
Yeah, the advice I have is, your chances of being born is 1 in 400 billion. You can Google it. It's 1 in 400 trillion. Wow. You can Google this and it'll tell you what your chances of being born. So the fact that we are here is very, very profound. So my advice would be to even ask yourself first, I wonder what my purpose is. Like, why was I born? Mm-hmm. And don't wait and let life happen to you and then get to be 60 and wonder that. Start wondering that now. Get quiet and the Lord will speak to you and he will let you know what your purpose is. And we all have one. And it's so critical, in my opinion, to understand what our purpose is. And when it's so freeing. Mm-hmm. When you figure out what your purpose in life is, it's so freeing. And you go through life being the driver instead of letting life happen to you. You're lifing. And so I encourage anyone to do that self-reflection and then lean into that. And if you say, well, Rhoda, give me more, like how am I supposed to know what it is? It's what comes natural for you. It's what people seek you out for. It's what consistently people coming to you for the same type of thing over and over. It comes so natural that you miss it because that's your gift. And it's so natural you take it for granted.
That's right.
And so that ultimately your purpose is centered in that, whatever that natural organic gift is for you. You just need to figure out what it is, do the self-reflection, lean into it, and then figure out how to monetize it too. Because at the end of the day, we got to eat. It's first natural, then spiritual. And use that gift for good. So that's my big advice to people. Competition, comparison is a thief of joy. Don't even do it. I'm so busy focused on fulfilling my purpose. I don't even have time to worry about what other people. And part of my purpose is to help people fulfill theirs. And so there's no reason to ever be jealous. Jealousy is as cruel as the grave. The Bible is true when it says that it is a killer, not of joy, but you die internally. I don't even engage in that. And so those are the piece of advice that Rhoda would add.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing your
Thank you for
testimony. Of
having
course,
me.
we
Yes.
are going to link this amazing book in the
Yes.
description box. And Rhoda, I just want to again give you your flowers for
Thank you,
everything that you're
Julie.
doing, everything that God is going to continue to do in your life. To my viewers, thank you for 1 year. I'm glad that we had
What a huge
somebody.
milestone.
I know, thank you. I'm glad that we had someone as amazing as you close out this season. This is not the end. This is just the beginning of what God has in store for God Girl
Yes,
Diary.
I
And
love
again,
it.
thank you so much,
Thank
Rhoda. And with
you.
that, XOXO, God Girl.
Yay. God girl.